Hello and welcome back to module number 3. Great job for making it to day 3 of this course. So by now you've spent some time observing your reading behavior with your child, and last night you tried dialogic reading with them. How did that go? Was that a little bit uncomfortable? Was that okay? Was it something you were already doing, but maybe now you do it in a little bit different way? Whatever the answer, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much for sticking with this course. It really will benefit your child greatly. So today's course is about writing. And writing is something that's difficult in story time because writing involves muscles, right? So if you've been to a story time lately, you've probably noticed that it's not what you generally think of as story time. Storytime at a library used to be your child sitting quietly in your lap while an older librarian with glasses would sit in her rocking chair reading a story. And everyone was quiet and everyone was listening, and it was very soft and mellow. But that is not what story times are like anymore. If you go to a story time in a library today, chances are your child is going to get up and move around and dance and listen to music and maybe bounce on your lap. Maybe they'll get a copy of the book to interact with themselves. There are lots of ways that story times have improved in recent years because of the advanced research that's happening in children's growth and learning. When children are moving, they are learning. And you know what? Adults are the same way. It's really hard for adults to sit and learn. The last time you were in a class, do you remember maybe falling asleep or daydreaming or otherwise not engaging with the material? But then think about a different class, maybe a yoga class or a class where you had to get up and move around in order to learn what it is that you were learning. That is what really inspires you to learn. How much do you remember? When you're driving and you're listening to some music, sometimes when you pass that same landmark, you hear that song in your head because of the interaction of movement and learning. So that is what we're going to start inspiring in your story times at home as well. Now that might not mean that your child is getting up and moving around, but that they're engaging differently with the text besides just sitting there and listening to it. Here's an example. So this book has letters that you can trace. So it has some cutouts and it has some raised letters. Now, as you're reading books like this with your child, you can talk about the letters that you see. E for elephant. So you can trace the inside of this E, or you can trace the outside of this E. Same with the F for flamingo. You can trace the outside of the F or the inside of the F. As your child is doing this, your child is learning those fine motor skills that they will ultimately need for writing. Even if they're a very young child, those fine motor skills can't start early enough. And yes, granted, they're going to be messy at first, but the more you practice with your child, the better they're going to do. So there are some things to remember about these fine motor skills. We'll talk about all 3 of them. First one is that gross motor skills have to come first. So if you want your child to be a writer, whether they write books or just do homework assignments, they need to practice their gross motor skills. So as they're going through their day, if you do yoga, invite your child to do yoga with you. Even if they're just running around putting some weight on their hands, that is going to build the muscles that they're going to later need for writing. Then you can do activities like this one where they're tracing things that are more minute and building those fine motor skills. The second thing to think about is that writing doesn't have to happen right away, but your child needs the skills to get there. So things like holding crayons, even if they're holding them like this instead of holding them like a pencil, that's okay. They're learning those skills. And you can mimic that also when they're eating. So when they're using utensils like forks and spoons, the more that they can use that pincher grip, the better they're going to be able to write. And the third thing to remember is that movement is critical to learning. So make sure that as you're interacting with your child during the day, you're inspiring them to move. Maybe you go for a walk and look at things outside. Maybe you just wander around the house and find little things that they can collect in a bucket. The more that you do together and the more that you can do to really build that strength in their hands, the better equipped they're going to be to write once they get to school. So your homework assignment tonight is to go home and find a book that you might be able to interact with your child in a writing context. If you don't have one at home, that's okay. There are other ways to interact with writing with your child. You might have a magnadoodle where your child can take a magnet pen and write in a non-messy kind of way. You might have a tray that you can put some sand or some soap into and have your child trace letters with their finger in that tactile sensation. That's really great, especially if your child has a learning difference or gets overstimulated really easily. That's an excellent sensory activity for them. So it's the end of day 3. Go home, try those activities with your child, and I'll see you here tomorrow for day 4.